everybody, it's Ian the Off Kilter Crafter. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on FPP, which stands for Foundation Paper Piecing. It can be quite difficult when you think about it at first, but once you get the hang of it, FPP is a great way to put together complex blocks or make very precise blocks using this technique. It is a lot of fun, but it does take some brain power to think about doing everything in reverse. We'll talk about that in a minute once we get started. But as you can see, I get really good points whenever I do FPP, and FPP is a great way to get shapes that you normally couldn't create when just doing regular piecing as you're sewing. So FPP has a lot of great benefits to it, and there are a lot of great patterns out there for FPP. And today I'm going to show you how to do the basics of FPP. Now, whenever you're starting off in FPP, I highly recommend starting with just solid fabric. It's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about the right side of fabric and the wrong side of fabric, and if you mess up, nobody can tell. It's not a big deal. But as you start to advance your way through FPP, start thinking about using pattern fabrics to do more complex designs and patterns and all sorts of fun things. So today we're going to go ahead and put this block together. It's a simple block, very easy to create. And then as you start along your journey, you might consider doing freezer paper FPP. And my friend Becca has a video on that. I'm going to link down to it in my description. I'm also going to link it in the iCards up there as well. So basically, this tutorial is basically the foundations of FPP. Anyways, that was a joke. Anyways, this is basically getting started with FPP. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you can check out Becca's video and her freezer paper method. It is a really great video, and I would highly recommend checking it out once you're done putting this block together or one similar. Anyways, enough chit chat. Let's go ahead and learn how to start doing FPP. All right, let's first talk about what you need for foundation paper piecing. First of all, you're going to need your fabric, of course, the fabric that you're going to be using to put your block together. You're also going to need a foundation paper piecing pattern. There are a lot out there on Etsy. There are free patterns. There are purchased patterns. There are a lot out there that you can use. I'm going to be using just a very simple one today as demonstration. Whenever you print out your patterns, you can print them out onto regular copy paper. That's what I use. But you can also purchase some paper, specialty paper for foundation paper piecing that is like newsprint. It really tears away very easily whenever you're using it. But I use regular copy paper and have not had a problem. Now, you'll notice here in the top corner, a lot of patterns come with this 1-inch square. And that way you can take your ruler and make sure that your printout is the correct size, because some printers, as you're printing, can change the size of your printed page. So always make sure you're printing at 100%, so that way your 1-inch square is printed correctly, and that is a good indication as to whether or not you have the correct sizing. You'll need a ruler. As long as your ruler has a 1/4 inch on it, you can use any ruler that you wish, but a lot of people, including myself, like to use this at 1/4 ruler. It really helps because it's got a ledge to it. I know it's hard to see on the camera, but we've got a ledge that really hooks into the seam and allows you to add that 1/4 inch very easily without having to kind of futz around with it a little bit. I like to use a seam roller. This is a wooden seam roller, and this is for pressing out your seams. Whenever you are ready to press a seam, you can do that using this instead of having to go back and forth between your ironing board and your work surface. So I'm going to be using this today to show you kind of how the seam roller works. I like it better than ironing a lot of times, like I said, so that way I don't have to go back and forth between my two work surfaces and my work surface and my ironing board. But I do sometimes use my mini iron to help out. You can of course use a regular iron as well. If you're doing really small pieces, it does help to have a smaller iron. You also will need some sort of adhering kind of thing. That's not a very good description, but basically I used a glue stick, and this is intended for sewing, so it is water soluble, but you'll need some way to adhere your first fabric to your paper. I like to use the glue stick, but you can use an Elmer's glue stick, you can use pins, whatever makes you happy you can use. I prefer to use this one because it is easiest for me, but use whatever makes you the most comfortable. It's also helpful to have a rotary cutter to do this, so make sure that you have one. I have my Martelli one. I use a rotary cutter to trim everything up, but I also usually have a regular pair of scissors laying around. That way I can cut pieces of fabric off my main fabric to get it ready for putting onto my template. So I do like to hang on to my regular scissors and have them nearby as well. Also, a lot of people like to have a cardstock card nearby. This is a heavier weight than just regular copy paper, and this is to help you fold over the pieces of paper and fabric and give you a more creased edge. I don't typically use this whenever I'm doing paper piecing, but a lot of people do like to use it, and I'm gonna try and maybe use it today. I don't know, we'll see. I may do it once so that way you get the idea and then walk away from it after that. But anyways, these are the things that you'll need to do foundation paper piecing. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and of course, a cutting mat. I forgot. Underneath all this is my cutting mat. You'll need a cutting mat. All right, I'm going to move all this off to the side, and we're going to talk about foundation paper piecing patterns. All right, let's talk about foundation paper piecing patterns. You can get very complex designs or very simple designs. There's a wide range out there for you. Like I said, today I'm going to be doing this 6-inch block that's very simple, just 1, 2, 3. Nothing too hard about that, but like I said earlier, it's really great. Foundation paper piecing is really great for getting complex blocks put together. So if you look at this pattern, you'll notice that the actual foundation paper piecing block is reversed whenever you're looking at what the final product looks like versus the pattern itself. So whenever you're putting a block together, you're kind of building it in reverse. So the paper is actually the back of your block, and when you flip it over, that's going to be the fabric side is the front of your block. So a lot of times when you see a foundation paper piece block finished, it faces one way, and then when you're actually putting it together, it faces the opposite way. You won't see that so much on today's, but it's very helpful to know whenever you put your patterns together that you're basically building it in reverse. And then a lot of times foundation paper piece patterns are broken up into small chunks that make it easier to put the actual pattern together. So for instance, this Sleepy Fox block from Third Story Studio, excuse me, try saying that 5 times fast. It has several different pieces. So we have piece G, piece C, piece F, and piece E. And inside all of these, it actually gives you numbers to work with. So as you can see here on piece C, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you would go in that order to put piece C together, and then once you put all of your templates together, you would then sew them all together. And usually they'll include instructions in the pattern on how to sew each section together. All right, let's take a closer look at the block we're going to be doing today. As you can see, there are only going to be 3 fabrics that I'm using today. We have fabric 1 in the center, fabric 2 going around the center, and then fabric 3 going around the corners here. So we only have 3 fabrics. You're also going to notice that there are 2 types of lines. We have our solid lines, and then we have our dashed lines. Our dashed lines are going to be our seam allowances. So we always want to make sure that our fabric goes over those seam allowances, and we don't want to cut anything on our solid line. So if I had cut this out of my page and I had cut on the solid line, I would have needed to remember to add a 1/4 inch onto my fabric. Otherwise, the block would have been smaller than what it was intended to be, and we would lose points whenever we were sewing. If we had a whole set of these together, we would have lost our points as we sewed them together in the seam allowances. I did rough cut this. You can see I did not do perfectly, and that's perfectly fine because we're going to trim it up nicer once we actually get going putting our block together. So first things first, we need to go ahead and start with number 1. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started here with fabric number 1. For that, I'm gonna use this parrot fabric from Tula Pink. And this is helpful if you have a light box or a light pad or something that can help you kind of see through the paper. What we're gonna be doing is we're going to be putting our fabric right side up on the back side. This is the only one that we're gonna be doing right side up. And I'm actually going to take this over to the window because what I want to do is I'm going to use the light from the window to try and see if I can match up my parrot right in the center of that square, so that way I get a nice picture of my parrot. So if you just have regular fabric that doesn't need a specific spot or, you know, whatever, you can just lay it across and be perfectly fine. But remember, you do want the fabric to go past that dashed line that goes around the center square here. I'm gonna go ahead and hold this up to the window and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my layout where I want it. This parrot is going to be mostly centered in my square. So I'm just gonna take a little dot of glue. I'm gonna make my little dot and then I'm going to push my fabric, press my fabric into it just like that. And that's gonna hold it in nice and tight. Then I'm gonna go in with my scissors and I'm just gonna trim off some of the excess, and I'm going rather large with this. Whenever you're doing paper piecing, you are going to waste some fabric. Just kind of accept that. It is perfectly okay. I'm holding it up to my light just to make sure that nothing shifted and it looks good. And like I said, I am going to be wasting a little bit of fabric whenever you do paper piecing. It's not a big deal. But if you hate wasting fabric, paper piecing may not be for you. So, all right, I've gotten that done. Now I'm going to flip my paper over. And I have some lines to work with. We're going to be moving on to pieces number 2, and we're going to be putting our fabric onto pieces number 2. All right, this is how to use the card that I showed you whenever I told you what all is included in foundation paper piecing. I'm going to take my card and I'm going to line it right up against that line. And I'm going to take my paper and fold it over and just kind of press along that fold. And so see, you have a nice crisp fold there. And now I can see on my fabric where my seam allowance is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that back. I'm going to grab my add a quarter. And see, this is what I'm talking about when it hooks on nicely. It hooks onto the edge of my folded paper very nicely. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to use my rotary cutter. I'm going to cut off. See, there's some of our excess fabric, and we have a nice edge right there that we can line up our next piece on. All right, let's move on to our next fabric. I have cut off a piece of fabric. If I lay it across here, I see that I have a good amount of size on all the seams around it. So this should be plenty big enough, but it's kind of like having to use your x-ray vision for this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lay it next to, and actually I'm going to find the straight edge there, and I'm gonna lay it so that they are both 1/4 of an inch past my seam. And I kind of have to use x-ray vision, or if you have that light board or a light box or light pad or whatever, that helps really be able to see where it is. So I know that this fabric is big enough and that I have enough fabric to cover this triangle whenever I sew it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to my sewing machine and sew this seam. Now, whenever you're doing foundation paper piecing, you want to make sure that your stitch length is turned down to 1.5, so that way it perforates the page and makes it easier to pull the paper off. So I've changed my stitch allowance, or excuse me, my stitch length down to 1.5. Next, what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I have my 2 fabrics on top of each other, but I'm going to hold this, make sure that nothing shifts, and flip it over. And I'm going to look and find the line that I'm going to be sewing on. So I'm going to go ahead, and I like to bring my needle down to a starting point. So I'll find that point where everything starts at, put it into the paper just like that. I am going to go ahead and start sewing. So I'll sew 1 stitch forward. There's the Bernina burp. There's 1 stitch forward. I'm actually going to reverse and then let it go forward again. And I'm just going to sew right along that line all the way across. And I'm going to come to the end. I'm going to go 1 stitch past. I'm going to reverse. And it's okay if you end up going a little bit further than the end. It's not a big deal because a lot of the pieces will build upon themselves, so you won't see too much going too far past once that's all said and done. But there we go. So I have sewn that seam together, and now we have our first seam put together. Let's take it back over to the cutting board and trim it up. Okay, again, I have gotten it all sewn together on my first line here. I'm going to take my seam roller, I'm going to pull back the fabric that I just put down, and I'm going to use my seam roller and just roll that seam out, press it very nice, just like so. And that is our first piece. Now remember, if you're doing a patterned fabric, so if I was using, let's say, some more of my parrots, whenever I sew this together, I want to make sure that my right sides of the fabric face each other. So the first time you put fabric on, the pretty side, the good side, the pattern side goes up. But from that point forward, always remember to put your fabric's right sides together when you're wanting to sew them. I'm using a very simple, just solid fabric, so it doesn't matter which side I put it on. All right, moving back to the front of our pattern, I am now going to go ahead and, it doesn't really matter which one we go to next. I could just work clockwise, I could work counterclockwise, I can work across from each other. It doesn't really matter which one I go to next. I think I am going to go ahead and go to the one on the opposite side. And again, all we're doing is we are just taking our paper and we're folding it up onto the card. And I am folding also my fabric as well, just to give me an idea of where it's going to land. So I do that. And we now have our line there. I'm going to take my add a quarter ruler again and just trim it. Cut that off. And now that lets me get this lined up like that. And again, I'm going to use my X-ray vision to kind of take a look at where that pink fabric is, and it looks like I should have more than enough room on all sides. So I'm going to take this back over to the sewing machine and sew this seam. All right, there we go. I have sewn my second piece of fabric on. Again, I'm going to use my seam roller and just roll it out nicely like that. All right, so there is our second one. Let's move on to our third one. And again, do the same thing. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to find that line and line up my paper and fold it over. And I'm going to cut some more pink fabric off. And as I look at my fabric here, I see that it is just slightly larger than that 1/4 inch. So I'm going to cut it, making sure that I'm keeping at that 1/4 inch. Here is some more that is going to go into the trash because those are way too small to do anything with. But again, I'm going to find and use my X-ray vision, line it up. Let's see, where's the center? About right there, and using my X-ray vision, it looks like it's going to fit perfectly. So I'm going to take this back over to the sewing machine. All right, there's my third one. I'm going to use my seam roller again just to press it out like that. Perfect. We're going to grab our card. I'm going to flip everything over and move on. This is the last triangle of the pink that I'm going to be doing for this pattern. So I'm going to find that line. And once again, I'm going to fold it over, give them a nice crease, and clean up my edge with my rotary cutter. Get all that out of the way. And I'm going to grab my pink fabric once again. I'm going to find that edge. And again, I'm kind of using my X-ray vision. It looks like it's going to fit nicely. So I'm going to take this back over to my sewing machine. Okay, there we go. There is our fourth one. I'm just going to press it out once again with my seam roller, just like that. All right, we are now completed with our fabric number 2. Let's go ahead and clean this up and get it ready for our next one. Okay, I've trimmed it up just by making it even with the edge of my piece of paper here. Let's go ahead and move on to our fabric number 3. I'm going to be using this turquoise for today's demonstrations. And all we're going to be doing now, once again, is we're going to go on the line in between our fabric 2 and fabric 3. Again, I'm going to put my card right on that line and fold it back. And you might notice that it is a little bit harder because some of our stitches actually are in the way. And if you need to, you can pop them out of the paper, but leave them going through your fabric. This one didn't do so badly. It did just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that back a little bit. I'm going to grab my 1/4 ruler here. I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. All right, I have my turquoise fabric, and again, I'm going to use it for this corner here, and it looks like I have more than enough, but I am going to lay it underneath and just double check myself. So here is my seam allowance, just like that. And I'm going to use that X-ray vision, and it looks good. So I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and go ahead and sew it. All right, there we go. We have gone across our line right there. I'm going to flip my block over. I'm going to grab my seam roller and again, just kind of press it all out so that it is nice and flat, just like that. And I don't need to cut anything off there. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next one. Again, we are going to grab our card, and I did it, I'm going to go to this one. The number 2s I did opposite each other, so that's what I'm going to do for number 3. It doesn't really matter either way, but I'm just going to keep with consistency and go ahead and fold across that line right there. Trim everything up again with my 1/4 inch ruler. Gonna grab my fabric, and again I'm gonna put it right on that seam allowance, and this should be plenty of fabric, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine. Whoops, let me not throw my seam roller. Let me go ahead and grab my seam roller, press this out so that it's nice and flat. That's perfect. Let's move on to our next one. Again, grab my card. It's just the same thing over and over again. All right, so this is an important educational moment. If you look here, if I put this right on that seam line, you'll notice that my corner doesn't quite make it. And remember, we're wanting 1/4 inch. So if I move this about 1/4 inch, you'll see I have a good amount of fabric area that's not going to get covered. So this piece is going to be too small, and I'm going to go ahead and cut off another piece that will be bigger. All right, so I've cut off a bigger piece, and honestly, this is probably way too big, but for demonstration purposes, I want to make sure that I have plenty. And as you get practice in with paper piecing, foundation paper piecing, you can start to get better at estimating the size of fabric you'll need. It just takes practice. All right, I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and we'll sew this seam. All right, I have finished that, and again, just seam roll it out like we've been doing, and we have one more to go. All right, one more to go. So I'm going to put my fabric down. Let's get a more clean edge, I think. Let's try this one. I'm going to go ahead and put that right there. And it's okay if it goes a little bit further. You can always trim it back up after you have sewn. There we go. I think that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and sew this one. All right, there's our last seam there, and I'm going to take my seam roller. All right, there we go. Our block is done, but if you notice, I have a lot of extra fabric, and we need to go ahead and clean this up. I'm going to switch to my regular ruler now, and I'm going to find my dashed line around the edges, and I'm going to go ahead and line up my ruler with that dashed line, and I'm going to go ahead and cut all the way through there, just like that. And it's okay if it cuts off the paper. That is what you want. You want a nice clean edge. Those are big enough that I can probably use them again, so I'm going to put them into my save pile. And I'm just going to go around all four edges and cut on that dotted line. All right, I have cleaned it up. Let's go ahead and turn it over and do the big reveal. Oh man, that looks so good. It gives such precise corners and turned out great on this one. Now, if I was to do this with multiple blocks, if I was making a whole quilt out of this block, I would keep the paper on, and then I would work on using this line right here to sew my next seam. So if I had two of these blocks, I would line them up so that they're right sides together, and then I would sew along this line right here to actually attach them, because this is going to be your seam allowance. But since I'm not going to be doing that, since this is going to be a standalone block, I'm going to go ahead and take the paper out. And what I do to take the paper out is I nicely fold it back just like that, and then get a spot in, and then just tear along that seam. And since we did the 1.5 stitch length, it makes it a whole lot easier to take the paper off because it is already perforated. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around and just remove all the paper from this block. All right, I'm now down to my center one, and remember I put the glue stick on this one, but that's not a big deal at all, because whenever I peel it up, look at that. The glue stick held it long enough, but it just comes right off. You'll notice that there may be a little bit of paper in the corners, and I can grab my tweezers to pull out any remaining pieces of paper. I tend to, if it's not a very large chunk, I tend to just leave it there because it will disintegrate like in the washing machine when I put a quilt together. So I sometimes will just leave smaller pieces of paper in there, but there you go. There's a finished FPP block. So there you go, you've learned how to put together your first FPP block, and it's kind of addicting, and I like doing it, although I still make mistakes. I end up putting the fabric the wrong direction or forget it. It happens sometimes, and that is okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. Even the experts, I don't call myself an expert, but I know many experts out there, still have a moment of forgetfulness where we end up putting it the wrong way or doing whatever. It can happen. Don't be hard on yourself. Experiment, have fun with it. And if it needs to go into timeout for a little bit, that's okay too. I definitely have projects that are sitting in timeout until I'm ready to tackle them again. So I hope you liked today's video. Don't forget, if you want to take it to the next level and do freezer paper FPP, make sure to check out my friend Silbecca's video. It's linked down in the description below and up in the iCards as well. Make sure to check out that video and get another perspective on how to do FPP. It makes things a little bit easier in not having to take apart your template and reprint it. Anyways, go check out her video. She'll explain all of it for you, and you can get another idea of another technique. I hope everybody has a great day, and remember guys, normal's just a setting on the dryer. Bye!